Welcome to the Nation of History channel. Be sure to subscribe and like so you don't miss out on more videos like this one. Civilian volunteer groups became part of everyday life in Tel Aviv in the mid-1970s, a period of rising tension after attacks and episodes like the 1972 Munich Olympics, strengthening vigilance and broader mobilization in Israeli society. A blimp brought down by a nuclear test in Nevada became a striking symbol of great power military rivalry in the 1950s when the United States carried out desert atomic tests to study the effects of those blasts on machines and structures. Service members on the USS Blue Ridge pushed a helicopter into the sea to clear space for withdrawal operations during the 1975 evacuation of Saigon, a decisive moment at the end of the Vietnam War that symbolized the American pullout and the collapse of the South Vietnamese government. Indigenous children forced to pray in residential schools run by the Canadian government and the Catholic Church between 1930 and 1970 represent one of the most painful sides of colonization, with deep consequences for the culture and identity of Canada's Indigenous peoples. Thousands of soldiers returned to Vienna after the collapse of the Third Reich in 1945, marking the end of World War II and the start of Allied occupation in Austria, a crucial moment that sealed deep political change, reshaped borders, and pushed national rebuilding. The scene shows the systematic use of children in propaganda events under the German government in Germany, especially in the 1930s, highlighting how authorities aimed to project a fatherly image and shape public opinion to legitimize authoritarian policies. Rosa and Josefa Blazek, well-known conjoined sisters who performed as circus artists, appear with Rosa's son Franz in 1910, a time marked by public fascination with exhibitions of people seen as medical curiosities, a trend tied to traveling shows. American police examine a seized cannabis plant in a typical 1951 record, a period marked by stricter substance control laws in the United States under prohibition-focused policy, expanding enforcement against use and influencing later legislation. At the height of prohibition in the United States from 1920 to 1933, government actions aimed to curb illegal alcohol production and distribution, leading ordinary citizens to protect themselves from suspicion. The displayed poster reflects fear of being mistaken for someone involved in the underground market. An evening news headline reports the Titanic disaster as the ship sank on April 15, 1912 in the North Atlantic after striking an iceberg, causing worldwide shock. The event accelerated debates and changes in international maritime safety rules. Military forces began building the Berlin Wall on August 14, 1961, creating a physical divide between socialist East Berlin and capitalist West Berlin, a milestone that intensified Cold War tensions and separated families and communities for decades. Elvis Presley performed at the International Hotel in Las Vegas in 1969, marking a triumphant return to the stage after years away from live shows, reviving his career and helping turn Las Vegas into an iconic destination for major music performances. During a visit to Thailand in 1971, Bruce Lee cemented his role as an international martial arts icon, helping spread Kung Fu worldwide, a trend that gained momentum in the early 1970s with the release of his major films. The so-called Olmec colossal heads, dated to before 900 BC, are recognized as one of the greatest legacies of the Olmec civilization in Mesoamerica, noted for their artistic impact and for showing the cultural sophistication of pre-Columbian societies. The remark that an opera singer sounds like a little bird shows admiration for the vocal technique of classical performers who gained fame in the early 20th century, when growing access to the phonograph and radio helped popularize opera singing beyond traditional theaters. This behind-the-scenes Star Wars record aboard the Millennium Falcon points to the late 1970s, marked by the original 1977 film, a milestone that reshaped science fiction cinema and introduced new special effects techniques. Harriet Tubman, widely recognized for her work as an abolitionist and social activist in the United States, became a symbol of resistance against slavery, especially through her leadership in the Underground Railroad, whose historical importance still resonates into the 21st century. World War I veterans faced extreme poverty in Germany in 1923, a direct result of wartime losses and severe economic damage, made worse by hyperinflation and social and political instability that would later fuel the rise of extremist movements. Antoine Dubuclet Jr., recognized as Louisiana's first black state treasurer, stood out not only for his political role, but also as a major landowner who held more than 100 people in slavery, highlighting the contradictions and complexities of the post-Civil War era. Sweden's 1897 attempt to reach the North Pole using the balloon Örnen became one of the boldest efforts of the Arctic explorer era, highlighting harsh challenges and the relentless pursuit of scientific progress and national prestige in major polar expeditions. Virgil Earp, serving as a United States Marshal in Tombstone, Arizona from 1843 to 1905, played a notable role in the American Old West, especially during the famous OK Corral gunfight, an event that left a lasting mark on both law enforcement history and Western legend. Alvin Karpis, one of the best-known crime figures in United States news, became infamous for having his fingerprints altered in 1934, a first among the 4 Public Enemy #1 targets, and the only one captured alive, highlighting the Federal Bureau of Investigation's effectiveness against criminal networks of that era. Groups tied to illegal alcohol trade, known as moonshiners, operated heavily in American cities like St. Paul, Minnesota during Prohibition from 1920 to 1933 in the United States, when production and sale were banned, fueling local underground networks. Women leading protests rejecting bras in San Francisco in 1969 represented the growing strength of the feminist movement in the United States, a milestone of the so-called Second Wave, as they pushed for greater autonomy, freedom of choice, and challenges to imposed social norms. Aircraft designer Max Wiedenhoft stood out in 1932 by testing his innovative rocket bicycle, reflecting the interwar spirit of technological experimentation when new forms of propulsion emerged and pushed progress in aviation and personal transport. Wearing typical 1960s clothes and accessories, inventors tried to reinvent urban mobility by presenting fuel-powered motorized skates, an experimental technology that reflects the decade's optimism and belief in progress during the space race and major social change. A station worker helps passengers bring a baby through a window of an overcrowded train in Tokyo during a rail worker strike that marked Japan in 1972, a context in which strikes and labor tensions highlighted unions' growing challenges amid rapid modernization. The photograph records the first documented wheelie in 1936, a unique milestone of early car culture when the automobile was becoming a symbol of innovation and freedom, highlighting new ways of expression and risk-taking in mobility. Aboard Columbia, American astronauts prepare for the STS-1 launch, the first flight of the Space Shuttle program, on April 12, 1981. Marking the start of a new era of reusable spaceflight and driving major scientific and technological advances. Felix the Cat became the first animated character to get its own balloon in the traditional Thanksgiving Day parade in 1927, marking the start of a strong link between pop culture and major public events in the United States, a tradition that continues today. Wendy Peeney became known in the 1970s for appearing as Red Sonja, an iconic fantasy comics character at a time when cosplay was becoming popular in the United States and helping grow geek culture and women's visibility in fandom. Arnold Schwarzenegger became a global bodybuilding icon by starring in the 1977 documentary Pumping Iron, which brought the sport to millions, boosted his Hollywood career, and helped cement gym culture internationally during that era. Arnold Schwarzenegger, already known for bodybuilding victories and an early film career, attends the Cannes Film Festival in 1977 alongside Folies Bergère performers, showing the overlap between European glamour and international celebrities in the festival golden era. As part of bold marketing by New York bars in the 1960s, menus written on the human body drew attention to places like Barney Google's, blending irreverence and pushback during the era's behavioral revolution. Linda Carter's 1977 wedding to Ron Samuels took place when she was already famous for playing Wonder Woman on television, a show seen as a symbol of women's empowerment that helped cement heroines in that decade's popular entertainment. Girls wear shirts printed with the faces of Mikhail Gorbachev and Ronald Reagan while walking through Moscow in 1988, a moment shaped by a thaw in United States and Soviet relations, driven by negotiations that helped end the Cold War and reshape the global landscape. Children wearing straw capes walk toward a New Year celebration in Niigata Prefecture, Japan, a tradition kept even after the end of American occupation in 1952, highlighting the importance of local customs in Japan's post-war rebuilding. Hundreds of B-17 Flying Fortress bombers lined up on the ground at Kingman Army Airfield in Arizona symbolize military demobilization at the end of World War II in 1945, when the United States retired much of its air fleet, marking the start of the post-war period. Women workers like the one mentioned in Long Beach played a crucial role in United States industrial production during World War II, especially after 1941, when factories like the Douglas Aircraft Company sharply increased bomber production to support the Allied war effort. Students in United States schools took part in emergency drills during World War II, a practice that became more common starting in 1941 when the country entered the conflict, reflecting the era's tension and efforts to prepare civilians, especially children, for possible crises. During World War II, warning posters like "Our danger is real, must be ready," reinforced a climate of mobilization and civil defense in the United States, especially in major cities like New York, aiming to prepare the public for possible enemy action. The release of the BMW Isetta, highlighted as a 1955 Mini car, was a response to fuel concerns and the search for more efficient vehicles in post-war Europe, helping solidify the idea of affordable city cars in the decades that followed. American inventor Russell E. Oakes introduced the Spaghetti Aid in 1955, a small device designed to make eating pasta easier, showing the post-war inventive spirit in the United States and the decade's growing demand for everyday convenience at home. The RCA color television represented a major technological step in the 1960s, when television began to establish itself as the main form of home entertainment, changing cultural patterns and influencing social habits worldwide. The 1939 record, marked with the text "Another Nope," fits into a time of major global tension when the outbreak of World War II radically changed daily life in cities across English-speaking countries, bringing uncertainty, fast social change, and broad public mobilization. The Santa Claus training suggested by the Visible Rules points to 20th century British social practices that emphasize discipline, hygiene, and responsibility. especially after the 1918 influenza pandemic, when public event health concerns became more prominent. A Boy from Bavaria with a Small Camera in 1910 represents the growing public access to photography, driven by portable cameras like those made by Kodak, marking the start of everyday photography outside professional studios. Friends gathered at the seaside in the 1940s reflect shifts in leisure and style around the post-World War II era, when beaches became more popular social spaces and shaped the cultural and economic growth of 20th century coastal cities. Amid the cultural buzz of New York in 1957, signs like "I Have Questions" and names like Judy Holliday highlight the strong presence of theater in Times Square, cementing the area as an entertainment center and adding to Broadway's global fame. The construction of Hoover Dam in 1933 marked one of the largest engineering projects in the United States, vital to developing the American West by providing electric power and controlling floods, while also boosting jobs during the Great Depression. Workers connected to the Civil Works Administration, created under the New Deal in the United States, helped build the Lake Merced Parkway Boulevard in San Francisco in 1934, when Public Works aimed to reduce Great Depression unemployment and stimulate national economic recovery. Russian peasants cross a river carrying a killed moose in the Yenisei province in the early 1900s, a period shaped by a rural economy in pre-revolutionary Siberia, when subsistence work and farming supported the region's isolated communities. Yangtze River workers in 1946 faced major hardship towing traditional boats through shallow stretches, reflecting the impact of the Sino-Japanese Wars and political instability that shaped China in the first half of the 20th century and slowed modernization. During World War I, the donation of ambulance cars in Calcutta by wealthy Indians and supporters of the British Empire shows British colonial mobilization in support of the war effort, highlighting how colonies were involved in global military campaigns. Workers in factories like the one in Astrakhan played a vital role in producing and exporting caviar, symbolizing a Soviet push to earn hard currency during the 1960 Cold War, when luxury foods helped support the Soviet Union's planned economy. A record of a teacher enforcing discipline on a student in Wisconsin in 1905 illustrates how strict methods were widely accepted in early 20th century American education, reflecting the era's social and teaching standards. John F. Kennedy, before becoming President of the United States, traveled through Europe in 1937, a time when many young Americans sought broader cultural horizons overseas, an experience that later influenced his political and diplomatic outlook. Designed in 1963, the Studebaker Wagonaire introduced an innovative retractable rear roof, allowing tall items to be carried or a sliding camper to be fitted, a clear example of American auto industry creativity that pushed the idea of versatility in station wagons. The release of multifunction home devices, like a television combined with a radio and a bar in 1951, reflected the post-war period in the United States, when home consumption culture grew and appliances became symbols of status and convenience for the middle class. English public transportation underwent major modernization in the 1930s and 1940s, with the iconic double-decker buses becoming a symbol of urban mobility in London. These vehicles helped broaden access to the city center and supported metropolitan growth. The interior of the Wanamaker's department store in New York, decorated for Christmas in 1920, reflects post-World War I urbanization and mass consumption, when big stores became symbols of modernity and city leisure in the United States. The growth of automobiles on New York streets in 1915 symbolized major urban and technological change in the early 20th century, improving city mobility, pushing economic modernization, and transforming consumer habits and big city daily life. Mass production at the General Motors plant in Oshawa, Canada in 1959 symbolizes the peak of post-World War II auto-industrialization, helping the middle class access modern cars and supporting post-war economic growth. French contortionists gained prominence in circus shows starting in the mid-19th century, a time of growing popular entertainment in Europe, and by around 1865, Paris had established itself as a major hub for theater, variety acts, and the modern circus. Amid early 20th century social change, the record attributed to Albert Bourdrais titled Les Femmes de l'Avenir reflects the growing feminist movement in France, symbolizing women's hopes for freedom and education during this crucial period. Napoleon III, known for modernizing Paris and strengthening central power in France, ruled alongside Empress Eugénie around 1865 during the French Second Empire, a period marked by urban progress and tensions that would lead to the regime's fall in 1870. Pennsylvania communities lived alongside industrial growth, exemplified by the Bethlehem Steel Mill, a major name in 20th century American steelmaking, producing steel used in bridges, railroads, and ships, boosting the economy and shaping urban landscapes. Rush Medical College in Chicago was the site of important advances in United States medical education around 1900, reflecting the professionalization of health training, whose modernization strongly influenced 20th century medical practice in the country. The phrase "La cinematografia è l'arma più forte," attributed to Mussolini, points to the central role cinema played as a tool of public influence under Italy's fascist government, especially from the 1930s onward, strengthening the state's ideological direction over society in that era. The popularity of the television show Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In marked a turning point in American TV entertainment in the 1960s, bringing satirical humor and fast sketches that influenced United States language and culture during a time of social change. Venice's canals were already symbols of urban splendor and the city's commercial importance in 1897, when the long-standing gondola tradition remained central to daily life, cementing Venice as a late 19th century cultural and tourist landmark. The spread of the Ford Model T radically changed how American families experienced leisure and mobility, especially after 1918, encouraging early countryside drives and making roadside picnics easier along newly accessible roads. Railroad expansion in the early 20th century deeply transformed regions like the Columbia area and the Nehalem Valley in Oregon, linking isolated places and easing the transport of timber and farm goods, which boosted local economic development in this key historical phase. In the late 19th century and early 20th century, society looked for new options for entertainment and exercise, a period when machines like the one described appeared, designed to simulate experiences like horseback riding without real physical effort, matching mechanical progress, and a new focus on urban well-being. American teenagers, like the one mentioned at an Elvis Presley show held at the Philadelphia Arena on April 6, 1957, drove the rise of rock and roll in the 1950s, turning the genre into a symbol of youth rebellion and major cultural change. Along the Colorado River in Bastrop, Texas, local residents like Ms. Nora Washington kept the tradition of small-scale fishing with simple rods in the 1950s, a time when inland communities in the United States valued knowledge passed down through generations. Armored vehicles patrolling Oxford Street mark a tense moment during the 1926 general strike in the United Kingdom, when workers across many industries stopped work to support miners, leading the government to deploy official forces to maintain order and reinforce state authority. Local trade along Dutch canals, suggested by the word zeeman and the typical architecture, reflects the historic importance of maritime transport in the Netherlands in the early 20th century, when waterside markets and warehouses powered the country's urban economy. Handmade pasta production in Italy, recorded in 1929, shows a time before food industrialization, when manual methods preserved Italian culinary tradition and strengthened cultural and economic ties essential to local communities. Known as the bold new city of the South, Jacksonville went through rapid urban expansion and modernization in the 1960s, driven by promotional efforts meant to cement regional importance and strengthen local economic development. A snowman in Istanbul in 1929 points to an unusually harsh winter in Turkey that year, a rare weather event in the city's history since heavy snowfalls were uncommon and reshaped daily life for weeks. In the late 19th century, tools like the Empire washer began transforming household routines in the United States, making wash day more efficient for many families. The spread of these devices around 1885 marks the beginning of mechanizing household chores. If you enjoyed this video and want to support the channel, please use the Super Thanks tool below. Your contribution helps us keep bringing you amazing historical content. Thank you so much for your support, and see you in the next video.